Hello viewers, this is Mitul here. Module 8 Advanced Query Concepts that we have started learning, and now we will be understanding about the transactions. What is a transaction? Transactions in SQL Server are a fundamental concept for maintaining the data integrity and consistency. So basically, if a transaction, if we say, then a transaction is like a set of number of SQL statements. Okay. Now, if you combine all of these SQL statements together in one bucket or a unit of work, in which if all of these statements are if all of these statements are succeeded, so in that case all of these statements will be committed to the database. But suppose out of say like 5 to 6 statements, now if one of the SQL statement got failed, so in that case what may happen is all of these 5 or 6 transactions together will be rolled back. Means as if like you did not even execute this transaction at all. Means the previous date of the database basically. Okay, so that's how it works, and that is the purpose of the transaction, and what we mean by transaction is this only. Now, what are ACID properties? Now, in the ACID properties, A represents the atomicity. Okay, atomicity, in which like the transactions are invisible. Basically, they either complete it entirely or not at all, as we just saw or I explained, right? Like if you execute say 4 to 5 statements placed together in a single transaction, now all of them if executed, then all of them will be executed. If it is success, then everything will be committed to the database and everything will be saved to the database. But suppose if one got failed, everything will be rolled back. So that is what the purpose, or that is what the property says. Atomicity means completely, it completes the entirety, otherwise not at all, means reverts everything. Okay, that's the purpose of this atomicity. Then the consistency. Now what is consistency is like transactions bring the database from one valid state to the another, maintaining data integrity values. So consistency means like if there is a database, if there is a transaction, like you executed one transaction, and while the transaction is in progress, the other transaction will also be referring to this same transaction or the same part, same level of data, then both of these will be in the sync. Basically, to make them in sync, transactions are used basically, so that it can be in the sync. At the same time, there won't be any collapse, there won't be any concurrency issues happening due to that. Okay, and the third point is like isolation. What is isolation? Is concurrent transactions are isolated from each other. Basically when you just execute multiple transactions, right? One from one session, the other from the different session, and maybe from multiple sessions, right? So all of them are kept isolated using an isolation levels given or provided within the transaction, just to avoid couple of issues that can be caused due to the concurrency. Meaning, see, we don't know at what point of time which user might be executing what kind of queries, right, to a database or to a specific table, right? So you may be executed number of queries together in a single shot, or maybe from multiple session, number of users might be accessing the same part of the database, right? So in that case, it keeps them isolated until one transaction which has occupied or which is currently doing some operation, maybe reading it or maybe writing something to it, it will just keep it isolated from the other transaction to have them an access to it. Okay, in a certain way. I mean, there are definitely different sort of isolation levels that we'll be covering in the practical, but for now just understand like it keeps them isolated so that they don't like collide with each other. Okay, now the fourth one is the durability. What is durability? Is like once a transaction is committed, it changes, its changes are permanent. Means like once you say like it is commit, means like completely saved to the database. It won't be reverted, or you cannot revert it back unless you go and delete it manually. Okay, and that's the purpose. And then survive the system failures. Basically in that case, it saves the data permanently, so that your data will not be lost. Okay, so that way it will be saved and the durability can be maintained. Now, so basically we understood, right? Like A, C, I, D, all four. A means atomicity, C means consistency, I means isolation, and the fourth D means durability. Now the type of transactions. See, we understood what is transaction, what are transaction acid properties, but we need to understand how many type of transactions can be there in the real time, right? So there are four type of transactions that we could create. See, one type of transaction could be auto commit, in which like you do not need to write something, or say like you need to create any kind of transaction. Say each statements are a unique transaction, considering that sense. Say like you are writing a select statement, or maybe you are writing an insert or DML operation, maybe insert update or delete statement. So all of these are considered like a unique transaction, in which you do not need to mention something of context, like this is the context within which my transaction would be starting, and this is the context within after which my transaction would be ended. Nothing like that. There is no boundaries that you are giving to it. Okay, so that's what we understand as auto commit. Now in this case, what happens is like they are automatically committed and okay, so second type of transaction is explicit. Now, manually starts with the begin transaction. So first type of transaction we saw, that in which like we don't write any beginning of a transaction, or we don't say like this is the end of the transaction, right? But whereas in the second type of transaction, which is explicit, in which we go manually start the transaction by writing the keyword called begin transaction, and we close the transaction by committing it or by rolling it back. Okay, so these three are the keywords, or these three are the commands that we use before and after the particular SQL statement, or say maybe like a DML statements. Okay, now the third kind of statements, which would be like the implicit. In that, once a current transaction is completed, so the commit or rollback, maybe like if one transaction is completed with a commit or say like a rollback, a new transaction will be implicitly created. So what happens, say you completed this one transaction, you begin this transaction with begin transaction, within that you write like some DML statements, and then you say commit transaction, right? So that is considered a single transaction, meaning it's a batch of a transaction, you could say. It's a number of transaction but combined in a single bucket, and it's considered as a single transaction. So in a one shot, it will go and do the commit to the database. Okay, now once it is committed to the database, after which, like after the commit statement, the subsequent statement will be treated as a new transaction. Okay, since even though it is not considered within that same transaction, but then or maybe if it is not covered within the transaction block, then also it will be considered a implicit transaction. Why? Because this rule gets applied, because it automatically creates the transaction. Whenever you put in the statements, it automatically, the SQL Server system automatically considers a single DML statement or the statement as a like a transaction only. Okay, for that reason, the implicit transaction will be created. The fourth one is the batch scoped. In the batch scoped is like a transaction SQL explicit or implicit transaction that starts under a multiple active result set session becomes a batch scoped transaction. A batch scoped transaction that is not committed or rolled back when a batch completes is automatically rolled back by the SQL Server. Now, now, if you create a batch scoped transaction, then it will be committed or rolled back automatically by the SQL Server system. Means in that case also, you do not declare kind of a transaction. Say like this kind of transaction you may not declare, and you may not close the transaction, but it will be considered like a number of DML statements you may have written. So all of this will be considered a batch of statements, and all of them will be either it will be committed or it will be rolled back when you execute all of them together. Okay, so that is what is considered as batch scope one. Okay, so let's just see all of this in a practical. All right, so let us start about the module number 8.2.1 transactions with the dirty read issue. Okay, now within dirty read issue, what is happening basically is like when one transaction is doing an DML operation which is uncommitted yet, at the same time another transaction is allowed to be read, allowed to read the data. So that's the issue of a dirty read. Now in this case, one more point is similar to using a no lock for a table. There are two scenarios using which you can reproduce the dirty read. Okay, how come is like the first way you are reading the transaction, doing the DML operation, and which is not committed, and then other transaction is reading the same data. That is the first. The second point is similar to using the no lock for a table, meaning when you are applying the no lock hint for a select statement. Let's say like you are using a table over here and you are applying the no lock hint over here like this. In that case you can use the dirty read because it's not applying any of the lock on the table, and because of that reason you might find the dirty data, because the data which is not yet committed, still you could read the data which is not the accurate state of a database. Okay, so that's the issue of a dirty read. Now in that case, how to resolve such kind of an issue? First thing, like if you want to reproduce the kind of issue, then the first kind of isolation levels which are available in SQL Server to fix those kind of an issue. So first kind of the isolation level is read uncommitted. What it does is it ensures the physical inconsistent data which is not read. Now it allows the uncommitted dirty read data as well. Okay, so read uncommitted is what you will use to produce the dirty read data. First thing, this is the isolation level. The syntax to that is set transaction isolation level read uncommitted. Okay, and then second kind of isolation level to understand is read committed. Now what is read committed? Read committed is like only committed data is allowed to be read. In the previous case we saw that like it does allow the uncommitted data, whereas in this case it allows only and only committed data to be read by the transaction, the multiple transactions even, right? So it basically fixes the issue of dirty read. So to fix this dirty read we might be using the read committed isolation level, but then it still has chances to cause the three kind of issues which are like lost update, non-repeatable read, and then the phantom read. What are those kind of issues we will see in the subsequent section, but for now just understand like it may still cause these kind of issues having this isolation level. All right, now what is the syntax to this is set transaction isolation level read committed, and it's the default option of the SQL Server database. Fine. Now we'll see the we'll continue using the learning DB in this case, and let us just understand all these statements. Now the first line of the code is set transaction isolation level read committed is what I'm using in this current session, which is my default isolation level. Ideally I may not require to do so, but still for your sake of understanding I'm putting it here so that you understand it. Okay, now then the first statement you might write is begin transaction semicolon. Then you might write the update statement, wherein which like you might be updating the customer name with an name of the person, can be Adam B. Adams. Okay, now from the table called DBO dim customer, where the customer key is equal to 1. Okay, then what we want to do is we want to take a break. We want to pause the process basically for a delay of 15 seconds. So all three of them are separated by colon sign, and then the nanoseconds, right? This will basically pause the execution. During the execution you can take a pause. Okay, since we do not work in the production environment to reproduce the issue of a dirty read, this is how I can give you an example of it. Okay, now after that we might need to use either we might use to use need to use is rollback transaction, or we might need to use the commit transaction. So in this case we want to return as rollback because we want to revert the transaction deliberately. Okay, so let us just see and the similar kind of code in the other session of the window, in which the user is just reading the data while we are updating this transaction. Okay, so let's just go to the other window. Consider say this is a separate window and used by the separate user, but here to reproduce I am just being the same user opening the two different sessions and I'm achieving the same functionality. Okay, now in this session what we are trying to achieve here is set transaction isolation level read uncommitted. Why? Because we want to read the dirty data issue. Okay, why we want to do is because we want to read the dirty data. For that reason we are allowing it to read uncommitted. Otherwise by default it was the this read committed transaction. Okay, isolation level. So for now we will just go with this, and I will just keep it selected, and then we will run up to this point from the beginning, and then we will run this. Let me just shuffle it little bit. Okay, yeah, let me run it. Okay, now it's just executing it, and meanwhile we will execute the second transaction as well. So now as you see, this transaction is reading name of which the customer is Adam. Okay, now which is, see, now it has just completed, this transaction has just completed. The transaction is rolled back completely. So by the time it was just updating a name of a customer with Adam B Adams, which was not completed, and it is completely rolled back. And now if you try to see here in this window that what is the customer name, then you may see to that like whether it is Adam or whether it is David, right? So let's just see. See, it is a name called David, which was the previous state of it. Before we made the update, what was the value for that customer is this. Okay, but about what the other transaction has read was Adam B Adams, which is called dirty read, right? Now to read, now to fix this kind of an issue, what we need to do is simply we just have to change the isolation level over here from the uncommitted to the committed. Simple. Okay, very simple. Just set transaction isolation level read committed semicolon. That's it. Keep the rest of the things as is and go back to the original state, original transaction, just to showcase that since it was not updated with Adam, then let me keep it the same name as is. No need to change or do anything else, and we will just rerun the same transaction. But this time what we need to change it here is we will be commenting the rollback and we will be doing the commit, because this time we just want to see to the data which is committed only, right? For that reason we will just comment this section, we will roll back and then enable the commit transaction, and let us see the executing this transaction. All right, this is executing, and then this one is also executing now. So see, even after first transaction we executed and there is no wait for delay or something, still it is waiting for the result to come, right? It just waited for some time and now it has returned the original record, or say like an updated record, which is the committed record. And now we can go back to the previous window to see like whether this Adam name has been successfully committed to the database or not, right? Because earlier as we saw that the name was David for the particular user, now it should have been updated with the new name, correct? So let us just double check it. Right, so see, here it is updated now. So what the other transaction has read is the committed transaction, right? Because after this transaction has it committed, then only it has read the data, right? That is why it has read the correct data. So the issue of the dirty read is resolved now for this example, correct? So that's it. I just wanted to help you understand in this example, and happy learning. We'll continue in the next session. Thank you.